everybody. It's Christy again from Mentally Kills Podcast, and I'm back with another interview. Today we have Skip Sams, and I'm going to bring him out for you guys to meet him. Hi, how you
Hey,
doing?
I'm great. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'd like to get started by giving you the floor to tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Skip Sams. I am a recovery sober coach for musicians and artists in recovery who are looking to be creative without the use of drugs and alcohol.
Beautiful.
That's what I do today. And as well as write music, and I'm writing a musical right now. So
Ooh.
yeah.
Well, I'm not a good singer, but if you need one, let me know. So, what made you want to start that kind of the work? What put you in line for that? Was there something specific or?
Yeah, actually, I started singing when I was like 3 years old. And so music had always been a part of my life, a very strong part. And because I was the preacher's kid, I got to sing a lot in church, and people got to watch me. And, I'd turn around and shake my butt and they'd laugh. And, when you're a little kid, but I was hooked and I would sing all the time. And I had a very strong passion for singing and singing about the the God that I grew up with. And um, I found out when I was I not found out, I realized, when I was before I hit puberty, that I'm gay. And I started hearing the messages that they were saying um, at church, and different televangelists and stuff that were on TV, and that God hates gay people. They used actually a different term that I don't like to
Yeah.
use.
Thank
And
you. By the way, I hate that too.
I started hearing the message as I started to understand and became in the teenage years. The message I was hearing was, God loves you, but you're going to hell. And so on one hand, I'm growing up as an adolescent and just self-discovering of who I am, and on the other hand, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go to hell. So I thought, if I try to be um, a better person of faith, I'll put it that way, a better person of faith, then God will save me. And I used to pray, God, don't let me be gay. Don't let me be gay. And at the same time, I started experimenting with sex and, looking for validation that way. It's which led to me being a good addict, because I learned how to live a double identity from the early teenage years, right?
Right.
Here I am trying to be a great, extreme person of faith. And on the other hand, I'm the person who's going to hell. So as I got older and older, and I felt like I had to make a decision of either keep going with the faith or be authentic, because the two didn't match up.
Coincide. Yeah.
And that took, because music was so tied into that. Um, when I was a teenager, I was traveling and singing at different rallies and semi-pro, constantly singing. So it left this big hole, right? It left. Is that a dragonfly?
It was like a fly. I was like, where'd that come from? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It left this big hole. And, I continued with music and stuff, but the purpose behind it, just other than self-glory, or I wasn't sure. I mean, I went to music school. I started writing for orchestras. I was doing things, but there was still this hole, that the spirit, not having that belief system, had left. So, um, yeah, I'm where do I go from here? When I was
Well,
19, when I was 19, I was at a music school out in Los Angeles, and I was introduced to cocaine and margaritas on the same night.
that's
Boom,
a terrible
gone.
combination right there.
And I forgot to mention, I was bulimic at this time. but I soon, after I found margaritas and cocaine,
It wasn't
I
an issue
like
anymore.
suddenly was cured from bulimia, right? Um, and so that went on for years, and I would find some success and start with my music career, and I'd find some success. Like I wrote a musical, it was produced in Los Angeles, and boom, a
Oh,
few months later, I was like blackout drunk. I mean, I would find these and let's see, I was in my early 30s and I had a recording studio downtown Chicago in the Loop, right? Like right in the heart of the city. And at this time, I started doing a lot of crystal meth. And
you
I
need the
started
harder
doing it.
voices. Yeah.
Yeah, I started doing it in a way that was different than just, casual use. And I was hooked, right? And
Yeah.
I left, it was a fall day, kind of like it is now. And everything outside was beautiful, crisp. It was like 4 o'clock and the sun was starting to set in Chicago, and everything had this orange glow, that fall sunlight.
Yeah.
And the sky was just blue, and the contrast was so beautiful. And I'm looking around and I'm like, this is so beautiful. I'm going to I'm going to close my recording studio so I can become a crystal meth dealer so I can use full time. And
Well,
it was boom. They say life can change with a thought,
yes, it can.
and it does, because that was a thought that I made a decision. So I closed my recording studio almost immediately. And, I used to say, I lost my recording studio. I
Yeah.
lost my music career. I lost my ability to play. I lost my voice. I lost my relationship. My family abandoned me. I used to say all that. But after getting sober and staying clean for years and doing recovery work,
Congratulations, by the way.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I forgot to mention my clean date is 4/20/2006.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Beautiful.
But I realized after doing a lot of work that I didn't lose anything.
You gave it away.
I gave it up. I
That's
gave it up.
important.
I abandoned my family long before they abandoned me,
Yeah.
right? They never abandoned me. They were healthy. They had to set a healthy boundary. They didn't abandon me. I abandoned them. My partner at the time, he didn't abandon me, right? He kicked me out. No, he was setting a boundary.
Yeah.
So when I continued this road for about 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I was, you know, as you may know, and you've probably heard before, but along with crystal meth, especially with gay men, comes a lot of sex, right?
I've heard.
It's so tied together. And after 3 years, I didn't want to have sex anymore. I wanted to be held. And I was so depressed. I would have people over, I would sell them their stuff, and they would go do their thing, which normally I would participate. But I was like in the other room, curled up on my couch, just so lonely.
Yeah.
And one morning I came to, and I was, yeah, I don't know if I was asleep or what. I just like came to. Um, and I thought, today is the day the pain ends.
Yeah.
Just go jump in front of the subway. And I had had suicidal thoughts before. I dealt with depression, since I was in high school, trying to balance all that out that I was talking about earlier about, my identity and what I was raised to believe, and went through so much depression. I had thoughts of suicide before, but I never made a plan. I never said, this is how we're going to go do it or go do it now. So when I had that moment, gift of desperation, GOD, gift of desperation,
Yeah.
I was 39 and I thought, you've messed up the last 20 years of your life. every opportunity that life has given you, you have thrown it away. You've just thrown it away. So just go do it. I had contracted HIV 2 years before. And even though in 2006 or 2004, it wasn't like we had medications at that time, it wasn't the death sentence that we thought it was. And, you know, there was enough science to know that, but it was still devastating.
Of course,
And
yes.
and there's also in that, I just got to throw in there that in my recovery work, I was able to see that the way that happened, it's a different story. The way it happened shouldn't have. But if I would not have been high, it probably would not have happened. So that's me
True.
accepting the responsibility. Doesn't excuse how it happened, doesn't anything like that. But these
It
are the
never
things
does.
that we have to remember and take responsibility for.
Accountability,
Yeah.
number one. Yeah.
And not be the victim. Not be
Yeah.
the victim.
Because you're not. Because you're not.
Because we have tools to be empowered. And part of the empowerment is to take responsibility. But anyway, I got off track a little bit because
Okay.
when I had that thought, you've messed up half of your life, every opportunity that life has given you. You're going to be 40 years old and there's nothing left. But that thought was, the thought that came in was, well, wait a minute. If you've messed up the last 20 and you're 40, what if you do something the next 20 years?
Yeah.
Then you'll be 60 and 60 is not that old anymore, right?
No.
And then, wow, I could live to be 80. And then came the thought, your life doesn't have to be over. It could be half over. And that was just like, and that was the other thought. That was the thought that got me into sobriety. And I went to rehab and I did it for me this time. I had done it before, but it was to save my relationship. You know, it was for different things. But this time I did it for me because I wanted to live. When I got out of treatment, I went to play the piano. I hadn't played in a couple of years. I could not play anything. I couldn't even like form a chord. I tried to sing and my voice would just tighten up. And I'm not afraid of those sirens anymore, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could hear it in the background.
Yeah, I could hear it.
Okay.
I'm from Philly, so it's okay. I hear them too. I just happen to be in the back of the house. So.
Okay. I forgot where I was.
Well, I have a question. So
Yes, yeah.
I like something that you said, and it's something that I want to touch on because it's something that I hear all the time for people in recovery. So for people watching who don't know, I also had an issue with cocaine addiction and marijuana and all of the nine, which I don't consider marijuana a drug really, but it still technically classifies. It's an escape. I use it
Yeah.
as a form of escape, so therefore it's a drug to me.
Yeah.
When I hear a lot of people in recovery and they talk about their story, they talk about how they're a victim to their addiction. And I feel like that's a double-edged sword because yes, you may be an addict and there may be a lot of issues fighting that addiction, but you're not a victim to me. You made the decision to do it. You made the decision to continue. The choices you made based on whether you were high or not were entirely yours. Whether you were in the right frame of mind or not, you made the choice to do the drug in the first place. So that victim mindset, I think, is something that really needs to be addressed as far as recovery, because until you admit that, no, I wasn't a victim, I made that decision and hold yourself accountable, I don't feel there's ever going to be a recovery because you don't feel like you did anything in the wrong.
So I hear you, and
That's my perspective. So
yeah, I hear you, and I have a few diagnoses, right?
yeah,
One of them is drug addiction,
yeah,
right? One of my diagnoses is HIV. One of my diagnoses is bipolar disorder. And the way I contracted HIV, which I don't want to go into, but
right.
I was a victim, right? And but me having HIV It's not the same. So I am not a diagnosis.
Right.
I am not a diagnosis. I used to say I'm HIV. That is not true. I have
Okay.
HIV. It's part of my human condition, part of my human experience.
It's true.
I am not bipolar. I used to say I'm bipolar. No, I have a
Have
bipolar
bipolar.
disorder,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, I say I'm an addict. So I choose these things carefully now. Just like we, with HIV, we will say I'm pause, right? We take that on more as a advocacy,
Right.
we of a self um, empowerment, right? We say it to empower us.
I'm
Um,
all about empowerment.
yeah, and so when I say I'm an addict, it is claiming not that I am the disease of addiction,
Right.
because I am not the disease of addiction. I am claiming that as empowerment, which my recovery work, you know, when we first start recovery, we're told we're powerless,
Yeah.
right? So I understand where some people would say, well, that makes me a victim.
Right.
But I don't do this work to stay powerless. I do this work because I'm empowered. By the
Yeah.
time I get to, through the first round of the steps, I'm empowered. And whether somebody's working that kind of program or not, it's still just coming and saying, I'm an addict, is empowerment to remember I cannot put any mood altering substance in my body,
That's right.
because then I released the addiction all over again. Today, I'm not a drug addict. Today, I'm not a drug addict. There is no drugs. I haven't had drugs in 16 years, right? I'm I am still an addict, and I claim that. I will say it to remind myself and to empower me, knowing. And
And I love
also,
that better. I love that much better than saying I've been a victim or I've been victimized, which I mean, it can be true because you can be victimized by it. But by saying I'm an addict instead of I'm a victim, it gives you a
yeah,
different kind of empowering mindset to me.
there's no recovery in that. There's
No.
no taking responsibility for it.
Yes. Thank
And
you.
whether we inherited it or not,
Mhm.
it's just part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And I see these diagnoses not as, I some people say I'm grateful I've heard people say I'm grateful I got HIV because it changed my life. Well, I'm not grateful I got HIV.
No.
I'm grateful for the gifts that have shown up in my life after the diagnosis, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense.
It's the same with addiction. Am I grateful I'm an addict? I'm I don't know what life would be not being an addict, but I'm grateful for the gifts that show up when I claim the responsibility and start the recovery process.
That's right. So, question I have too to follow up with that, because I know you said you have, mental health conditions too on top of it. Did that make you jump into like therapy, or is there something you're doing to cope now that you don't have the coping mechanism that you used to use?
Well, that's,
Um,
and so many people with mental illness, they are self-medicating,
yes,
and that's not just my opinion, that's
that's
medical
no, that's a fact.
scientific proof.
Yeah,
And our mental, I mean, that's a whole discussion on like how our mental health system in America is like so effed up.
trash, trash.
Yeah. So
It's trash.
people are looking for self-medication, but
Yeah,
um, I so I was diagnosed depression early on, and we had tried different medications, but and then I was diagnosed bipolar, and it was, it's so hard to make a diagnosis when somebody's on drugs, street
yeah,
drugs. What's I find uh, somewhat humorous is that people who are self-medicating will trust the drug dealer with I don't think they will trust the street drugs to make them feel better,
but not the
but take them
actual
to a doctor,
pharmaceutical. Yeah,
and the doctor says, "Here, take this." And they're like, "Oh no, I don't want to take that." Especially like with creative people. That's a
Yeah.
big excuse of ours. Oh, I have to smoke pot so I can like be creative. Oh, here, take this medication, it'll help you remain stable. Oh no, that'll take away my creativity.
Right.
And it's like, wait, which one has been scientifically proven? Which one do you know where it comes from? That's not laced with anything that can be monitored. So today
Yeah.
I call it I do take a medication, a couple of them. But here's something else. 9 months after I got clean, I fell into a depression that was just as bad as the one that made me want to get clean. That morning when I woke up and said, "Today the pain ends."
Yeah.
I'm boring you. I'm sick. I know
No,
I'm
no,
not. I know I'm not.
it's morning still. It's well, no, it's afternoon for
I
me now,
know.
but
I'm just giving you shit. Um, uh, 9 months later, I fell into a depression. 9 months sober. That if I got out of bed and got on the couch to do a Sudoku puzzle, that was a very successful day.
absolutely. I love that.
It was
Yeah.
that kind of depression. And so my doctors were able at that point to confirm my diagnosis
Yeah.
and to start a medication regimen that was
Good treatment.
actually helpful, because it was actually helpful because they weren't medicating symptoms of street drugs anymore. They were medicating the true disorder.
Yeah. So I want to say like my next question for that is because you are working, with your doctors, you found, I'm gonna assume, a little cocktail that works for you. That's why I like to
Yeah.
call them little cocktails, but like
Well,
the
I
good
call it
kind,
my medication meditation cocktail
Oh, right,
because
right, right. Yeah.
I need both. I need my medication, but I also need my recovery program and my recovery tools because
Yeah.
they work together.
Mhm.
And I look at it like this. You got the glass half full. I mean, you know, whichever way, but you fill the
Got a
glass
glass
up
and there's
with
something in it.
medication and meditation, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the medication needs adjustment and you
Hmm.
start to go down, right? Sometimes recovery, you get a little lax, but whichever way, if one of them, you still are if they're going like this, you still have like, so, I lost how to say it. You still have a foundation. You
Yeah.
still have something underneath you. Like I can go into a depression today, but I got my recovery tools
Yes.
to help me through it.
So you're not just relying on your doctors and your meds. You have something else on top of that so
On
that if
top
one
of it.
slips, the other has your back and vice versa. It's like a marriage. Like
Yeah.
when one
Yeah.
slips a little bit, the other's got your back. It's a team. It's a
Well,
team effort.
because I was self-medicating that hole that I was talking about earlier,
Mhm.
that hole that was left. And
Loneliness, yeah.
recovery has given me the opportunity to have an understanding of a spirituality that accepts me and loves me exactly as I am.
Yeah, for who you are.
And I look at that, I call it that hole, the holy space.
That's cute.
I use that as that only my muse, my creativity can fill. So that's
That's
kind of how
beautiful.
I see my higher power as my muse of creativity.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. I love that.
So that's
So
how I got into the work I got into as well.
yeah. So for the work that you get into, so you work with, musicians and artists to help them kind of steer from what is, I'm going to say, the normal in the entertainment industry, which is to use these vices. Because I mean, I'm a comedian, so it's not the same level, but it is the same entertainment industry and it's all
Yeah.
the same stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen it too. It's like, hey, let's go smoke outside. Well, for me, I know that you said people on your end say they use it because it makes them more creative. But for me, like, I will never understand that because in my experience, it kind of fogs your brain. It's
Mm.
like what you're thinking is creativity is really just ramblings and they don't really work well,
Right.
for me. But I see it a lot, and especially with heavier drugs. So what you do is you say, why don't we try this instead early on? So it's not even an issue. They don't have to go down the same path and learn the same lessons. You're kind of giving them that leg up.
Mhm.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful work. And you feel fulfilled, right, with that?
I love it. I
Good.
absolutely love it. And it also helps me, instead of working for others full time, I get to fully work for myself and by being of service to others, which in turn also helps me create the space to create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? Look how far you've come, right? You should be proud of yourself
Yeah.
for how far you've come because guess what? If you hadn't held yourself accountable, you wouldn't be where you are today. It's not because of the choices you made or what you did, it's because you made the decision to hold yourself accountable
Hmm.
and say, I want better and I want more. And that's an amazing thing to do. And it's hard to hold ourselves accountable. I know. So
Yeah.
with that being said, I know you have unlimited time. So I want to take the last couple minutes to kind of give you the floor and I'm gonna pop out to give a message to anybody watching who might be struggling with that, the way, that I have, that you have, that we all have at some point with something, whether it's drugs, mental health, whatever it is. Just, a word of advice, a word of wisdom, or just a word of encouragement. And then I'll give my final thought and we'll end it from there.
Awesome.
All right. So floor is yours.
If you are struggling with addiction of any kind, there is something else that can fill that hole that you're trying to fill with the drugs or the alcohol or the food or the sugar or the debting or whatever your addiction is. I know what it's like to try to fill that hole. I know what it feels like in the pain to have that empty, but there is a solution. And if you follow the solution, find a recovery program of your choice, you're going to find emptying that hole will do a couple things. One, it's going to allow space to see what's really going on. What do we really need to treat? Do we need to treat a mental disorder? Do we need to treat depression? What do we really need to treat? Then we can make the decision to stop using the street drugs and start using some kind of regimen, whatever it is your doctors help you get. Some people, especially musicians and artists, they think they have to use the street drugs to be creative. But I'm telling you from my own experience that having the medical treatments that actually creates more space to be creative. And I believe that we're all creative. We create our own, we create our present and we create our future. And if you're wondering, how do I do that? Just think of the words that you're putting after the words I am, because those are the most important words that will create your present and your future. And in our society, it's easy to say, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm I'm just depressed. And people are like, oh, and they give you this sympathy. But it's empowering to say, I am mentally balanced. I am a handsome guy. Hey, I am creative. People around us who are jealous, they'll say, what an ego. But I know it's not ego. I know it's my higher power helping me and empowering me to be my best self and to create. That's my words of just be you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving me your time. And I will be with you in a second. I'm going to give my final words and end it from there.
All right, awesome. Don't forget, you can reach me at skipsams.com.
That's right. So, anybody listening, and I will put it in the bio when I post the video, skipsams.com. You want to head over there and check it out. Thank you again so much, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
So, for final thoughts, it is important to hold yourself accountable. You can do any street drug in the world, it is not going to fill the hole that you're experiencing because you are running from something. You are. You are avoiding something. You're avoiding facing a feeling. a mental illness, something you are running from, and you cannot run forever. You have to take accountability. It's okay to say, I used to use street drugs, as long as you're saying, I used to use street drugs. You don't want to use drugs your whole life because you're never facing the problems that you're experiencing in the first place. You can't run from everything. Are you going to pick and choose which ones you're running from and deal with others? No. You want to take accountability no matter what age and stage of life that you're in and say, I deserve better than this because you do. You're worth way more. And I can't wait to see what you can do. So, with that being said, this has been another Mentally Kill interview. I'm Christy, and I'll see you on the next one.